The theme of this year's conference is Resilience Realities, Securing Supply Chains in a World of Disruption. But what is the new global security situation and what threats are shaping it? As companies navigate an increasingly complex security landscape, supply chain resilience has become a strategic imperative. From geopolitical tensions and hybrid threats to sophisticated digital fraud targeting global logistics networks, organizations face risks that traditional security models can no longer adequately address. In today's keynote presentation, we'll hear how companies can strengthen resilience by integrating physical security, cyber capabilities, and data-driven intelligence to protect critical operations and maintain business continuity. To discuss this important topic, we are delighted to welcome Andreas Maack, Chief Security Officer of Volkswagen AG's Group Security and Resilience Division. Since 2021, Andreas has led Volkswagen's global security organization, overseeing risk detection, crisis management, and protection against both physical and digital threats. Prior to Volkswagen, he held senior security leadership roles at Merck and Bayer, and began his career with the German Federal Criminal Police Office, where he worked in counter-terrorism, counter-espionage, and organized crime. So please do join me in giving a very warm welcome to Andreas Maack. Thank you, Andreas. We've got till about 10 to 2, and then that'll leave some time for questions.
All right, thank you very much. What an amazing view to stand here. So, dear TAPA EMEA family, lieber Thorsten, wherever you are right now, dear colleagues, participants, experts, and friends. Thorsten, many thanks for the invitation. I'm very honored to deliver a keynote at this significant event, and I have to say it again, in this very amazing location. And as you know, a keynote is not primarily to talk about how we do things specifically at Volkswagen. Of course, I will touch Volkswagen the one or the other way, but it's more in general. Because I think today it's a great deal to talk about security topics these days, and especially for this distinguished audience. These days, many things are in a flow. Many things have changed, not only in the past few years, but specifically over the last couple of months, honestly. Security today, I'm confident to say, is in times of what I would call a gold rush. But only if we play it well, our function will reach the next levels. So much of my keynote in advance and upfront. Traditional patterns and reaction schemes won't help us. In facing all the change that I'm about to talk now, I'm convinced we need to change ourselves in the middle of everything. No matter where we look, globally operating companies with highly interconnected supply chains are facing unprecedented challenges. And in recent years, the discussion around security and risk has shifted significantly. You all hear on a daily basis very often terms such like new security environment, resilience, de-risking, artificial intelligence, and many more. And these terms are part of both the public as well as the professional discourse. And at the same time, I personally believe that many of these terms remain somehow ambiguous or vague, as they intend to describe a development, but from my point of view, without precisely explaining what change is actually meant or what concrete consequences arrive from using these terms. So looking into such questions will be one of the main frames of my keynote speech. And having said that, a naturally starting point for me is the question of what we specifically mean when we speak about a new security environment. At least in Germany, we had a very famous speech in the German parliament which coined the word Zeitenwende. And today it's updated a little bit. We call it Epochenbruch, so the break of an era. And it has become undeniably evident from my point of view that geopolitical elements have shifted. And Sam said that already. Tensions are increasing. Military conflicts, unbelievable to say that, have returned to Europe. hybrid threats are increasingly shaping on our environment, more or less on daily basis, what we can read. And all that economically impacting us and at the same time influencing political decision and decision makers. So if we take a look at this in a nutshell, then we could very easily come to the impression that we are dealing with an entirely new quality of risk. But I think we have to look into that a little bit more differentiated. Crime, organized cross-border criminal activities, violence. And just see yesterday's press conference from the Ministry of the Interior together with the BK administrator Holger Münch with very disturbing numbers and figures and statistics. Or take the economically motivated attacks. Every of that is not new. It has always been part of the society, and alongside with that also always been part of industry. What has changed from my point of view is not the existence of the risks, but the way they manifest. And that's a difference, and has also changed maybe the scale of impact. So I believe that traditional patterns are not replaced by new ones, but they're rather expanded. So to give you two examples, you're all aware the well-known grandparent scam from the past. This involved over times to what we call phishing or spear phishing attacks. Today, motivated by AI, even on larger scales than ever thought before. Or take another example, classic crime, truck robbery from the past, now complemented by complex, organized modus operandi to what we call phantom carriers. The underlying risk, the underlying crime stays the same. So the real change, in my opinion, is not the what, it is more or less the how. And today's threats are faster, unfold the impact over shorter periods of time, and achieve a much wider reach than ever before. So individual actors, many people, can with relatively simple means influence entire systems because of anonymity, traceability has decreased, and dependencies between individual events increased sharply over the last couple of years. So I think this leads to something which I like to describe as the erosion of boundaries. And with this erosion, the way risks manifest also changes. Events, from my perspective, are no longer merely local, but they unfold along supply chains, digital system, and entire organizational structures. Single incident can easily and simultaneously affect multiple processes, can cascade through a company, can develop across and beyond any organizational boundaries. And this is all reinforced by new technological capabilities. The ability to manipulate information, to conceal identities, or to process vast amounts of data with very simple tools at almost no cost, available for everybody, and by that also very easily available for organized crime groups. And this shifts the perception from my point of view, and it complicates to distinguish between the criminal acts that take place in the digital space with those in a physical world. And this triggers an important, for me, very important aspect. The behavior of those people who are dealing with the risks. Security longer is, from my point of view, not any longer just like crime enforcement and a matter of, let's say, targeted defense against specific offenders or individual cases. It has become, to a very significant extent, and maybe this is most importantly, a matter of decision-making capabilities on the side of the security teams. And beyond the security teams, of course, also all kinds of employees in companies, dispatchers, when we talk about logistics, managers, systems owners, you name it. And everybody of those people on daily basis take decisions under uncertainty based on incomplete or potentially manipulated information. So, thinking this a little bit further, the human factor moves for me to the center of everything. And it's not like in the classic IT environment where the humans are often being referred to as the weakest link in a complex IT system. The human factor is a decisive component of a functioning overall system, and a system that can only work when humans act deliberately in it. If we think about that, then I think we need to reconsider a little bit of our status quo. From my perspective, it's clearer and clearer that many of the existing security approaches are reaching their limits. Many of our security approaches, procedures, processes, how you name them, were developed and built in times a couple of years ago when risks could be seen in isolation or were deliberately, maybe even to say falsely, treated in isolation. Processes in the past were a little bit more stable than today, and the pace of change was actually significantly lower. So, if those approaches that we have chosen from the past rely on clear responsibilities, fixed rules, and standardized measures, we have to say this doesn't work this way anymore. Today's environment, as we mentioned before, is characterized by dynamics, interconnectedness, and, like I said, uncertainty. And all the classic approaches, from my point of view, do not only partly fail, they're ineffective if they are applied in the new setup. So the central deficit, from my point of view, lies less in the identification of risks rather than in the ability to appropriately deal with them. In other words, knowing the situation does not mean being in control of it. The challenge today is not primarily to collect information, but to derive robust decisions from it and implement action consistently. And this is what I say precisely the requirement why I say we need to rethink security in a certain way. What has been the response so far? I mean, this is all not new. In this context, the concept of resilience has established itself. And here again, I would like to take a closer look because resilience, from my point of view, is often totally oversimplified. It's frequently described as the ability to return a system to its original state after a disruption, commonly and very often described or illustrated with flexible materials such as bamboo. I think this understanding falls totally short because it has two mistakes. It thinks that the original state is or was a site of stability. So do we really want to go back to original state? And they say the other side is desirable. So in dynamic environment, I think this assumption doesn't hold for long. Systems continuously evolve. Conditions shift. New or modernized, modified risks emerge, like what we said before. So simply returning to a previous state cannot be a sustainable desire, nor can it be a response to a global complex challenge. And if it was desirable to act like that, then we face classic business continuity patterns, but not resilient structures. With both could work. Resilience, from my point of view, must be understood as the ability to adapt and evolve under changing conditions, ideally in an agile manner and with foresight regarding both current and, most importantly, potential future scenarios. So, how is that possible? How can this be achieved? How can this be managed? We require a shift of focus from individual measures to an overall functioning of organizations. Resilience is not a single tool, nor it's an isolated activity. Resilience is an agile system of interconnected capabilities. And to be very precise and very strict and very straightforward, resilience is only available for organizations that are able to steer, to share, to cooperate, and to manage collectively. And this stretches classical organizations, specifically classical security organizations that are very often historically built in silos, often to their maximum. The capability is to collect relevant information, to assess it, and then most importantly, to derive decisions from it. And this is not only one feature, this is the foundation of managing uncertainty in combination, what I said before, the human factor, which is utterly important in this context. So a key element of this whole thing is the capability of handling data, handling information, and the contextualization. But the mere availability of data does not create value as such. What matters is the ability to generate actionable insight from data and translate them into concrete courses of what I would call like corporate action. This process is not new to us. It's often referred to as intelligence. Intelligence matters, but the emphasis has to be less on the technical system, but more on the quality and availability of decision-making foundations. And this requires even more differentiation. Many organizations that I work with still operate under the assumption that risks should or can be treated equally. This leads to a traditional view of fair and even distributed resources, but honestly, this does not reflect the actual risk landscape. Effective security concepts require consistent alignment with criticality of assets, criticality of processes, and criticality of structures. Not talking about people here, the importance of humans in that whole system I've mentioned before. But when we talk about non-human assets, not every asset, not every route, not every process, from my point of view, is equally important. So decisions and subsequent action must be reflected against the actual relevance. And if you take this logic as a foundation, then this has far-reaching implications for practical implementation. Protective measures are no longer applied across the board, but deployed specifically where they have the greatest impact. Resources are not distributed evenly, but are managed along clearly defined priorities. And as a result, this focus shifts all of a sudden from reactive measures, classical reactive measures, to preventive approaches. And by that, risks can be addressed early and can ideally be avoided after all. And as said before, resilience is only available for organizations that are able to steer, to share, to cooperate, and to manage collectively. So this means another key building block in this whole system is the connectivity. Security does not create impact in isolation within individual units. It is rather an interaction of all kinds of parties involved. And within companies, this requires a close cooperation between the functions that often enough have traditionally operated separately. Beyond that, collaboration between companies, public authorities is becoming increasingly important, but we are all saying this since decades, so that has not changed the importance of public-private partnerships. Because risks do not stop at organizational boundaries, and neither can organizational boundaries be held responsible for managing such risks. So we are not only dealing all together within what we call a shared threat space, we are living in one every day. And in that threat space, the digital and the physical world are components in terms of threat, risk, crime, are one and the same. So the particular challenge lies in the fact to integrating all these factors and elements of this new world into a functioning overall system. So resilience does, as mentioned before, not arise from the mere addition of individual measures, but from the interaction of intelligence, criticality, connectivity, and what I said before, decision-making capabilities. And only when these elements align, a system emerges that is capable of dealing with uncertainty. And now looking about all this with regards to logistics and supply chains. Not new to all of you. You are much more an expert than I am. By definition, supply chains are complex systems with numerous interconnections and dependencies. They have always been vulnerable to disruptions. And at the same time, they are so essential to value creation for companies, or in some cases, even to maintain and keep public order. So the ability to identify and protect critical elements has always been a critical success factor for this industry. And in this context, prevention can play a very essential role. Every incident, that's at least the philosophy that we follow, that can be avoided, not only reduces potential damage, but it also increases the stability of the overall system. So at the same time, the economic benefit of prevention can directly be observed. It can be avoided. If it can be avoided, it directly contributes to value creation. But this process I see very often falling short in daily life because at least we in Volkswagen, for the time being, are not using this information as a key performance indicator to underline the importance and the value contribution of security. But we're working on this. So if we focus more on prevention, security can and will become an even more integral part of business decisions, rather than being viewed as a cost factor, or what I personally think is even worse, as a so-called enabling function. So if we make a little reference to Volkswagen, if we look to the Volkswagen Group, many of the points that I mentioned and the developments can be clearly observed. The transformation of the company towards new technologies, new business models and markets is driving a significant increase in complexity. Our products become more interconnected, supply chains even more global, dependencies more diverse. And in this environment, security can no longer be understood as a downstream function. It must become an integral part of strategic orientation for the company. And this is exactly what we are focusing on in my team these days: group security and resilience. So the response to this challenge, from my point of view, lies in the consistent further development of the security organization, building on clear governance structures. Functions today need to be, and for us increasingly are, interconnected. We improved our information flows, and we enhance our decision-making processes systematically. We introduce a criticality-based steering model that allows us to deploy resources in a targeted manner, and we create transparency across different risk profiles. And all this is complemented by a significant expansion of our intelligence capabilities for better situational awareness and for more informed decision-making. And those developments highlight that security must increasingly be understood as a strategic capability. Combined, effective practiced resilience, security can influence an organization's ability to act and can by this become part of an organization's value creation. So, if we put all this into perspective, a few conclusions can be drawn from my side. The current security situation is not the actual problem. The underlying problem is the way we manage it. The assumption that complex and dynamic developments can be controlled with the tools of the past proves inadequate. Second, resilience is neither a tool, nor does it arise from a mere addition of individual measures. Resilience is the ability to make sound decisions under uncertainty and adapt to new potential situations. Third, Security must differentiate more strongly and align itself with the criticality of assets or processes. Without a consistent steering logic, resilience remains nothing less than a buzzword. So the decisive question for the future is not whether risk can be completely controlled. We all know this will never be the case. The key question is whether organizations are capable of learning faster, adopting, and consistently aligning their decisions with changing conditions. So far from my side, thank you very much to all of you for being here, for taking the time to listen. Once again, thank you, Thorsten, for giving me the opportunity of sharing some of the thoughts that we today deal with at Volkswagen and a little bit beyond. Not to leave you with the impression that everything we do in Volkswagen is in perfect order. It is not, but we are on a path. We have started huge interaction programs. We have started huge resilience activities in which we try to develop some or most of the thoughts that I've presented here into a next stage. The company is in heavy waters these days, as you can imagine, so it's hard times, and again, it's kind of a gold rush time. And if we manage to do this actively and consistently, I think security will develop to, you can call whatever you want, 2.0, 4.0 if it's digital, or maybe today even 5.0. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm ready to answer any questions.
Andreas, thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I've had lots of questions in, and I've got some questions of my own, and we've got a few minutes, so let me put some of those to you. First of all, what is your view on the balance between the need for fine granularity in information with the high volume of data points and the resources that it requires?
If we do not have a lack of something these days, I think it's information. Yeah? There's information everywhere. The question is it good information? Is it tangible information? Is it information that I can make use of for benefiting the company? Yeah? To give you an example, was it last year? We had the super election year. Yeah? And at the beginning of the year, we were sitting together in the team and we're discussing, the super election that can change here and there, starting with the US and then further to some European countries and so forth around the globe. And we made an action plan on how can elections impact us and what can be the follow-up consequences for security. This activity was not successful, to be honest. So we were not able to make this information kind of tangible and to bring it into actionable items. But what we took is the learning curve from that to say, hey, we failed. What do we do to make things differently in the future? And by that, information is not the problem. The question is, how do we translate it? How do we adopt to the demands of a company? How can we advise board members or decision makers? How can we take influence in production, in supply chain, in all kind of governance models that we have in the company? And this is like what I see the future of our function very specifically.
Thank you. Another question. VW Group relies on thousands of suppliers and logistics partners globally. As supply chains become more digital and interconnected, what do you see as the single biggest security challenge for the next 5 years or over the next 5 years? And what should companies be doing now to prepare?
It's difficult to say what's going to be the highest impact. I think the business model as such, and many of us face that, is at risk these days because of transportation issues, because of tariffs, because of trade wars, because of conflicts that appear everywhere in the world. So a good preparation to avoid any of these losses, I think, is key for us for the future. So you said thousands was the question, or 1,000 suppliers. I think it's more like 50,000 or 100,000. So the complexity is the system as such, to deal with that. And we are rethinking some of the traditional approaches with procurement, with logistics, because we see that this cannot go on forever like this. Yeah? And complexity is exponentially increasing. This won't go for good for a long time.
Another question. Why is enabler worse than cost element?
I love that question. For me personally, maybe it's my lack of English understanding, but an enabling function is somebody who does by whatever it takes to support the business. And I love to do that. That's not the point. But sometimes as security, we have to take decisions that the business doesn't like. Yeah? And give you an example, when we have a war in Ukraine, Russia invading Ukraine starting, and we see the potential for a conflict, and then we give order to the business to evacuate 150 expatriates from Ukraine, nobody in the business loves me. Nobody would ever think that we are a business enabler as such. So we take decisions also against the business if necessary, but on daily terms, of course, we support as good as we can. Yeah? So this is why I have my struggle with enabling. Enabling means support at any cost, and one day the compliance question is being asked, so can you really go and go to a certain support? What I like my function to be called, and what I'm trying to position it in Volkswagen, is a steering function. We steer processes, we contribute to processes that gives us a different seat at the table with a different tag and much more voice than just being like the long arm of cost center, avoid the costs but provide your output. But that requires and also to add or to complement in this value scheme and to have a value contribution, which is really difficult because if there was an easy solution, we would all have it since 50 years. Yeah? And this is work in progress also for us.
Another one, how do you interface security and resilience?
Group security and resilience. So we are basically the driver, but very much comparable to security. It is wrong to think that only the security department does security. And it's at the same time wrong to say the resilience department is doing the resilience work. What our tasks is in both of the worlds, which complement each other quite nicely, is to steer processes, to bring people together, to trigger discussions, to provide frameworks, and by this to enable, now it has the word, to steer the business into a next level of possibilities. And resilience is a living organism, and but the current hurdle, the first hurdle, is to overcome the wrong understanding of the term resilience and to give it a touch of a pulse, of a heartbeat, yeah? And not to go around with this bamboo example, because, and I think I made that clear, this is not the desirable state, this is not how we should be acting.
I just want to interlude and say thank you so much for all these fantastic questions that are coming through. We'll get to a few more. Andreas, how does Volkswagen reach the transport companies for HVTT cargo, and what are the criteria to select them?
Oh, that's a specific question. I have the team sitting there. Ask so specific questions to the cargo team. Yeah.
And they'll be here in the network breaks for that. Okay, perfect. We're all talking a lot about AI at the moment. How is AI helping you translate the risks and complexities that you're describing to drive actions?
That's a good one. Yeah, I asked a co-pilot, I have to do a keynote presentation at TAPA, write me a text, and this is what came out, so then the artificial intelligence is doing a good job. But reality is there is plenty of things where I think AI is useful, so I'm not anti-AI, but sometimes I think we are losing the focus on not everything AI does is beneficial. Yeah, it's the same like with cars. You can have a car and go and visit your old grandparents. You can drive a paramedic car or police car, so everything very useful. But we also know examples where people take the car and crash into pedestrian areas, so you misuse it. So, and I think the potential of AI being misused is totally underrated. On the other side, we have plenty of regulations, specifically in Europe, ruling or giving rules to AI of mechanisms that we do not even understand. So, and I personally try to run a balanced approach, a positive mindset, but also focusing or putting some light on the risks. In terms of security, what we can do is we can much easier process information in real time. We can much easier come to conclusions. We can become with some stuff much more actionable with the use of AI. And this is, let's say, again, focusing on the point of the importance of humans in that system. I do not want a machine to take the decisions for me, at least not right now. We are facing the first or second generation of AI these days. Think about it in 5 or 10 years, so don't quote me then. But for the time being, I want people in my team to review the results with using AI to their best extent possible. But mistakes that we make and then take the excuse of, oh, that was the machine, it's not good.
Andreas, we're going to leave it there, but thank you so much for getting our conference off to such a thought-provoking start. And I know people can try and catch up with you whilst you're here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.